Hello everyone, once again this is G, and today I want to show you yet another farm village. This one grows Nosh beans and Sleet wheat, and so it needs to stay nice and chill. And I'll show you how that's done in a minute, but first just want to mention that this build uses a lot of the concepts that are shown in the mushroom video. So if you haven't seen that one, check out the link in the description below. And I also want to run this idea by you guys. Let me know if I'm crazy or not in the comments below. But imagine, what if we had one big kitchen village in the middle of the base, and all the ingredients were delivered there by conveyors. And from that kitchen base, frost burgers would be delivered to all the other villages on the map. The burger conveyor loaders would be enabled on a timer cycle, and conveyors would be in carbon dioxide atmosphere, so the food would not spoil. Let me know in the comments if I should make a video to test this out. Okay, let's have a look at this base now. First of all, we have 3 levels here. Let me pull up an overlay. On the bottom, we have our living area down here. And in this case, food gets delivered by runners via the transit tubes here. And on the next level up, we have our farm. First, we have at the bottom the Nosh beans, and on top we have the Sleet wheat. And these 2 crops can coexist provided that you hit a sweet spot in temperature. So if you maintain this room at about -2 degrees, this works. And if we look at our temperature, it's very controlled. It's about -1.7, 1.9 below zero, and this works for us. And once again, what you'll notice here is we've got these pneumatic mesh doors here and here. And open or not, these doors, they segment the rooms. And so on this side we have greenhouse, but on the other side we do not. And inside the doors, we do not. However, because they're forced open, dupes are able to walk through them as if these doors aren't even there. So if you look at the room overlay, what happens is we got the greenhouse over here, 51 tiles, and we have a miscellaneous room up here. In fact, if you really want to abuse this, you can extend this greenhouse all the way until you have 90 farm tiles, but I didn't do it in this case. But all this equipment up here, such as these sweepers, motion sensors, and the lights, they're all able to reach through these doors and interact with something on the other side. So the light is shining down here, and the motion sensors are able to detect the dupes. Speaking of lights, here they're submerged in a layer of ethanol, 20 kilos per tile, and it's about -2 degrees. We have to use ethanol because water would freeze here. But what happens is we have these motion sensors, and when dupes walk around here, they will turn the lights on. And you don't even need an end gate, frankly. You can just connect 2 motion sensors by 1 wire to a light, and if at least one of them is green, the entire wire is going to be green. So this works. And we have glass tiles here. You can also use diamond if you want for extra decor, but this lets the light through. And this allows the lit workspace buff to work on the dupes while they're working on the plants. As well as far as I know, the dupes will also run a little bit faster when it's an area that's lit. So this works. The other thing is the ethanol here, it also acts as a little bit of a heat sink and a buffer. And you need a little bit of a buffer because the temperature down here is usually a bit lower and it's a little bit higher up here. This helps to buffer things out a little bit. And speaking of cooling, this whole farm is cooled by a conveyor loop of dirt that's been pre-chilled. And I'll show you the conveyor setup in a minute, but first let's have a look at the very top level. Okay, so up here we have the chiller itself. And above that we have essentially a simulation of the rest of your base. We have a feed of ethanol at 50 degrees, water and dirt and fertilizer essentially at room temperature. And they're all feeding into this chiller. And this chiller cools them down to about -3 degrees before they're headed into the farm. Let's have a look at the chiller itself. Okay, so here we have an AquaTuner steam turbine combo, pretty standard. Petroleum on the bottom, steam on top, steel AquaTuner, and it's running supercoolant. Let me show you the plumbing here. Ceramic plumbing, a little bit of insulation here inside the steam box, the rest ceramic. And then here we have copper plumbing here, radiant piping. And the ethanol here is being cooled by this loop, as well as a little bit of ethanol that's cooling the turbine. Now, we want to maintain the ethanol pool here at no cooler than -50, and that's kind of optimal. But you can play with this as well if you want. And we want to maintain the temperature in the steam box no higher than 200 degrees. And so if it's higher, it will just simply turn off this AquaTuner and let the turbine soak up the heat, and then AquaTuner will resume. We have a third sensor here to check the temperature of the supercoolant. This really isn't necessary unless you're running something other than supercoolant. So if you're running ethanol inside the plumbing, you can then go ahead and have the sensor. I just put it here just because I always do it, so force a habit. Okay, next I want to talk about this ethanol path over here. This is very important. So this is what really soaks up all the heat, and it's cooling this ethanol feed over here, and it's controlled by this vent coming in. So if there's too much ethanol, it will just stop dripping. And here we have it set at 100 kilos. Same thing goes for this water. Again, 100 kilos, but the temperature is maybe a little bit different. Here I have it set at -5. For water, it's 0. So we don't want to, freeze the water here. And this temperature sensor will open the doors if it's getting too cold and stop the heat transfer. Also, this pool of ethanol is cooling the 2 conveyor loops coming in. We have fertilizer and we have dirt, and I'll show you that in just a minute. Now, on each loop, there's a conveyor thermosensor here, and it checks if the dirt or fertilizer is below -2 degrees C, and if it is, it will open a shutoff and release the packets into the farm. And I've used a similar setup kind of to preheat refined carbon with magma, where there's a loop on a conveyor belt, and if the temperature is right, then items get released off the conveyor belt, and then the conveyor gets fed by a bridge. I'll show you that in just a minute. But what happens next is if the farm belt is too full or gets backed up, then everything continues and it gets dropped over here out of these chutes onto these weight plates here. And let's say if a weight plate sees that the weight on top is above 2 tons, then it will turn off this shutoff over here and will stop feeding into this pool. So let's say dirt will no longer feed into this pool, and there will be no dirt sitting here and circulating inside, getting way too cold. We don't want that. So if this guy sees, okay, too much dirt, turn off shutoff, and then this will be emptied out eventually, drop onto this weight plate. And then also the weight plate will turn on these conveyor loaders, which then, if there's not enough dirt or fertilizer, will then top up the rest of the farm there. And therefore the farm belt always gets topped up. So if this is empty or there's some kind of a delay, there's like a 2 tons of buffer of dirt and fertilizer plus additional ton in each of these conveyor loaders. So there's not going to be a shortage inside the farm, and we won't have an issue. You see here this weight plate now unloaded. It's below 2 tons. All of a sudden the dirt is coming back on now. It's going to get into this loop and it's going to circulate until it's cold enough. This guy will open up the shutoff and feed it into the farm. If that belt is too full, it's going to fall into this weight plate, and then the weight plate will check this, essentially this overflow. And if there's too much overflow, it will stop feeding and so forth. I hope this helps, but I'll show you the conveyor belt in just a minute. Okay, so let's have a look here. Again, we got the ethanol feed, hot ethanol coming in, gets chilled, and then goes into the base. Here we have a valve set at 1.5 kilos per second. That's the rate at which it's going to be taken up. So this way, there's not going to be any buffering going on. We don't want to have a buildup of ethanol inside the farm down here. So you see, no buildup. Same goes for the water. It's set at 1.5 kilos per second, and this prevents any kind of a backing up happening of water, and therefore the pipes are not going to burst. Also, all the pipes are made of ceramic here for water, and for ethanol it doesn't matter. So it's made out of granite, just regular pipes. In fact, ethanol helps to absorb some of the heat down here and keeps this really nice and cold at about -5 degrees. Over here we have these vents. This was used to pre-fill ethanol into these sections here, and then afterwards they were just disconnected. Same thing goes for here and here. These vents, they're just leftovers after pre-filling. And then over here we have the water, and again we have the feed, but also we have a little bit of tea here, and this is for the dupes. So this goes down here, comes in, and then feeds the toilets over here. Then we're gonna look at the vents. So not a whole lot going on here. We have the CO2 vent to pre-fill this CO2. Then we have the chlorine over here for the living area. Again, you can just use CO2 for this, frankly. And then we have the oxygen. This is set up the same way as for mushroom and other farms. We have oxygen coming in. And this guy is a top-up line. First, this CO2 scrubber has a priority. Checks to see if there's CO2 down here. If it is, it's going to filter it out. It will take the CO2 and everything else out, and will pump the oxygen out of the selected orange line. Feed it here as a priority, and then the bridge will top it up. Then the vent out here is a priority, followed up by topping up the suits. And that's it for the venting. Okay, I figured I need to zoom out for this one. As promised, let's have a look at the conveyors. Okay, here we go. We have a loop of dirt looping, naturally, as loops do. And this loop tops up these conveyor receptacles. There is a total of 5 on each floor, total of 10. And once these receptacles get full, it just spills over back onto this belt. And once this belt gets empty, it gets topped up over here by this conveyor bridge. These other two bridges just set the direction of the flow. And this conveyor bridge over here is being fed by this belt here, coming off this chiller. And if this belt gets low, it just gets topped up out of this buffer from a conveyor loader. Same thing happens over here for the fertilizer. Comes off this belt from the chiller. And if it's too low, it gets filled up over here by the conveyor loader from this buffer. And the buffer stores about 3 tons of both dirt and fertilizer each. This additional belt over here, this is to take away these 2 of them here. They merge into one belt. And this just goes to the rest of your base, to the kitchen. And this takes away all the product of this farm. And that's pretty much for the belt. Let's have a look at the automation. Okay, quite a bit of automation here. Let's have a look. First, we have this line over here. That's to keep the doors open. You can also have the dupes open the doors. I just used automation. Then we have automation for each of the lights. We just have motion sensors. And no AND gates here. Just merge them together. Works fine. Same thing here for motion sensor. And another one here. And there's a couple here. Then over here, we have the automation for the weight plates. What we have here is if this weight plate is over 2 tons, it will go ahead and turn on the loader and turn off this shutoff over here to feed additional dirt or fertilizer into the chiller. And then over here, we have automation for these pumps and doors. So if the temperature here is too low, it will go ahead and open the doors, stop chilling, and turn the pump on, and vice versa. If it's too hot, turns the pump off and closes the doors to chill the liquid inside. This vent over here is controlled by the hydro sensor here, set at 100 kilos. Same thing over here. The temperatures are set differently. Water is set at 0, and ethanol is set at -5. And then as for the automation over here for the turbine, and as long as this is not too cold and this is not too hot, it keeps the cycle tuner running. This third sensor here is not required if you're using supercoolant. I just added it here. Okay, finally, let's have a look at the power grid. Okay, here's the power setup. And for the most part, everything runs off this one conductive wire, which is hooked up to a large transformer. And I know the potential load is high, but actually these things don't run at the same time. And average load is about 1,000 watts at most. The heavy users, we got the transit tube axis, aquatuner, and then also the steam turbine. These are connected to the main line, but everything else here runs off a single large transformer. And that's pretty much it. I think I'm going to go build this out in my main survival base now. This has been Greasy Hammer, and if you found this helpful, then smash that like button and subscribe if you want to see more. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.